Hi Danielle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Mel?
Well, I'm great. After having about 10, was it 10 days, 8 days in a different part of the UK, having a really cool trip, but you've had some time away as well.
Yeah. I went to a different part of the states, to a different state. Got to enjoy. It was funny because we both got to, without even knowing that we were making these plans, we ended up going to the same type of environment and enjoying ourselves equally as much.
At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. I love when that
Yeah,
works. It's serendipitous in ways.
serendipitous. Yeah, certainly was that. Because I wasn't sure whether I could take the time because I think I've said to you um, previous conversations that the projects I've been involved with have been really full on because we've created them from scratch, had to design them and then mobilize them. So there's nothing worse sometimes for people if they do take leave, that you've got to work extra hard to take leave so that you
Yeah,
can have a week off and come back and work extra hard
extra
defeats
hard.
the idea of actually having leave. So being able for me to be able to get to that place of going somewhere that I wanted to go to, but really park work, because this is the
Yeah.
first time in over a year. I hadn't realized until I went. I nearly took my work laptop because last time I went on leave, I did take my work laptop and I
Yep.
was sat there almost with this compulsion of taking my work laptop because I've purposely not put work emails on my phone, so I can't access anything from my, and it's a new phone as well because I smashed my other phone previous to the trip, slid off onto the concrete floor several times where I couldn't even access any information on it. So I'd have to change the phone, and I was sat there looking at this laptop, which is it's a big one. Of do I take that? No. So I have to be really quite forceful with myself to
Yeah.
say, leave it there, get
Yeah.
in the car, take your stuff, and go and part work for a week. So that was quite a challenge because that was the first time with all the different projects I've been working on in over a year. And then with the global pandemic and everything that's been going on, we've had lockdown, as you know, in the UK. Has been everywhere's different.
Right.
um
Yours has been a little bit more severe than in the States.
yeah,
So,
and I
yeah.
think ours only really um every few months it's been different, but things only really started to open up where people could start to travel abroad. Now, I didn't really feel like getting caught in this whole it might change tomorrow business.
Right.
That's too much change too soon. So I chose a venue in the UK, which is one of the really beautiful parts of the country. So what we thought is, because we've explored the pursuit of happiness
Yeah.
in previous podcasts, is this was us applying a lot of those things in action to our own lives,
Yeah.
to to not necessarily, we weren't purposely always doing it because it was more about being in the moment, wasn't it? It was more about
Yeah.
really going with the flow of what we could create in that time space, because I
Yeah.
knew I only had this time at this point in the year in which to use that opportunity to go and explore, which I love doing because numerology wise, I'm a 5. So I like to go off and explore and have new experiences. And I think you had the same sort of feeling, didn't you?
Yeah. It was just kind of this overwhelming feeling to get away from the consistent work effort that I had been putting in. You
Yeah.
had several projects get to a place of not necessarily completion, but where you could step away and take the breath.
Yeah.
And I had completed one of my projects, and then a couple others were in just this really nice spot where I had this opening, and I did the same as you did. And it's funny because we didn't realize this until after the fact, but I put all of my work away as well. I didn't bring anything with me. I didn't.
Uh,
I made it a point to stay away from things that would caused me to leave the moment that I was in,
yeah.
to research or to focus on whatever it is I'm focusing on at the moment. And so it's been really, it was a nice change of pace. It was nice to, we preach being in the moment, and in the moment we are working towards these projects, working towards this stuff. But, it was very important to be able to really enjoy the space that was being created, and this moment by moment experience that was going to be had if I stayed focused on that and not on all the loose ends, or on the things that I could accomplish, or allowing my mind to wander into its philosophical side and then have to research it and look into it. It was nice just to kind of just be, and allow the inner child to come through and just go explore and keep myself busy in a way that was natural. It wasn't a forced busy. It was just everything seemed exciting, and I really wanted to do it. And I'm just really glad that it happened.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk a lot, whether that is, through the podcast or in our separate conversations, about the tools that we endorse and apply to ourselves, whilst creating, the day-to-day experience of working and kids and shopping and all the other things that you do in, for your everyday lives, of implementing the tools and trying to stay in this beingness, whilst always working on something that has a trajectory of, it's that constant interplay, isn't it? With being in the here and now, with this trajectory of, this is in this week, I need that in that next month. And I know that in my work life, I do things in 3-month segments. And I kind of knew in March that towards the end of September on these projects, they would get into a more stabilized position, and then you can take that break. But it's also about utilizing windows of opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was, and I will ruminate quite a lot of, shall I go away and can I be bothered? And, I like, I want to stay in the same space, so I can just stay at home. But actually, I forget still, even though I know all this stuff, that when you transplant yourself into a completely different space and you park some of those things, it's much more possible to immerse yourself totally in that being in the here and now experience, especially when you're in surroundings that either increase that feeling of awe, delight, the satisfaction, whether that is the food that you eat, the sunsets that you have, listening to the waves rolling. So we thought also it might be nice to share some of the experiences that we've both sort of noticed in that process, because one of my newer experiences was actually going with a friend for a few days and traveling in the car, and I love being on the road, and I love exploring new places and just seeing what turns up and finding this little cafe, in the middle of nowhere, or taking a detour, and all of those moments that build on moments that then that other stuff that normally comes in, like you say, whether it's the thought process or somebody else requiring something or something else that you've got to commit to with work, aren't there to disrupt what becomes almost like that Abraham Hicks talks about, building of momentum. It becomes more possible to generate those feelings.
It is. It feels like, it's contradictory, that when you take the break, when you take the pause, and just go and do something opposite, like work unrelated to work, that you could actually be consistently building this momentum. But the momentum doesn't stop, because you've created this machine to run on its own, and it continues to run, and it continues to gain this momentum. And what you're doing is clearing that space, and clearing the residual energies that need to clear, so this momentum can get bigger and bigger. And even if you don't look at it in that way, that is kind of what's happening, is you're clearing this space for yourself and for whomever you choose to involve in that, and allowing this this rest period knowing that this machine that's been running consistently is going to continue to run for you and gain this momentum for you, so that you can in return clear and allow this new energy to form, so you come in more ready, I guess would be the way to put that. It's when you start to implement these steps that we've taken to get to this place in our existence, which is, we're in the place of, we've healed. And I'm not saying that, that there's not continued healing, but that you've done the big stuff. You've done the big healing. You've recognized who you are. You're recognizing that you're manifesting your life, that you are in control of your destiny in that way. And then the acknowledgement that, part of that manifestation is being able to take that pause, take that deep breath, and create this world around you that allows you to take that pause, to take that breath, to renew that energy source, because the wheel's still turning, right? It's still turning. That machine's still running. You're still creating it, but you're clearing that energy for yourself to come back and have a fresh set of eyes on it, a fresh perspective on it, a deeper breath, because you're not running at full speed nonstop.
Yeah. And there's something about, certainly, because I had this experience, and I haven't had it for a long time, because I haven't had a trip where I've just been able to park everything to the degree that I could lately. Last time I was able to do that was sort of 2018, I think, when I was able to take about 3 weeks out and went off to Italy. And I remember having that feeling of how much putting yourself in an environment that you want to go to, whatever that environment is that lights you up, whether it's forest, hills, cities, landscapes, coastal scapes, whatever that is. Being involved or witnessing things that you're interested in, or that you just are curious about, and then of meeting people who because in all those different spaces I go to, because they live by the sea, so 3 of the different places I went to, it's a surfer lifestyle. I love watching the surfing going on, sitting on the beach when the music's playing, totally chilled and relaxed, ramping up, and not being anything, no name, no title, no. And this is where Ram Dass, and I was saying to you in some of the messages that we were sharing, I've been listening to a lot over the last few weeks, talks about becoming nobody. And I think even the film that has been released or is due to be released now is about becoming nobody. And it's quite an interesting way of looking at how often we grow up, and he talks about this, we grow up and our parents have this idea about who it is we're going to become, whether we're going to train to be a lawyer or a doctor, or whatever the idea is about the child in the family. And then they'll go through those motions, and you go to school to be somebody, and you get these exams to be somebody, and you join this person to be somebody, and you're somebody in that relationship and somebody in those friendships. And yet there's something quite freeing in his experiences of being, like a psychologist for years, and looking at all these labels and personality and persona and the masks that we wear. All of that is when he had his own mystical experiences and realized he was a consciousness, and they were masks and personas, and he wasn't this person, he wasn't this person, and he was witnessing the falling away of all of these things that he'd claimed that weren't really him, because he hadn't really wanted to pursue the path that his parents had in mind for him anyway. And that was the kind of where I was sat, sort of reflecting on how freeing it is to go to a space, no matter whether you say you were famous or not famous, or you were known where you live, and then you go somewhere and everybody's a nobody, and the nobody has a negative connotation, because it's this striving to be somebody. But in that moment is we were all exactly just consciousnesses in human form, and some of those human forms were surfing, and and you're experiencing the waves and the sea air and the sun shining on you and the music, and no one is relating through any of those things of
Right.
status or what you do, or the kind of usual things. You go
Yeah.
to a party, who are you, what do you do?
How many
And
kids do you have? Are you married? And none of
yeah,
that
all of
matters
those
because,
things that, like,
yeah.
what is that really saying anyway? And so it was all of those sort of processes of thinking about how, even with everything I've learned and all the different theories I've come across, that you still notice that you get caught into, because as I'm placing my laptop back on my desk, what was I telling myself about what I needed to do if I
Right.
took the laptop?
Right.
What was that about? What was
Right.
that draw about?
It's true, the need to not respond because in the current position, you're nobody and nobody has anything to respond to. And, and I don't have any, and just to be surrounded in the sea of nobody was actually a beautiful experience. We had random conversations with random people here and there, but you wouldn't remember their name. You wouldn't remember anything that they told you. They just had,
You had an
it was
experience.
had a consciousness experience where you were speaking to another form of consciousness and you guys
Yeah.
related to whatever it was. And then that was the end of it. And that energetic, all you have left is that energetic imprint. And it's a beautiful experience to be able to reach the place of saying nobody cares. And I am so grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And Ram Dass talks about that in some of his some of the lectures that they've, he's been recording stuff since the 70s of, those where he got to a stage of where you can be so full of love for everybody, because you get to a stage where you realize that there isn't really any difference in love. We can love everybody.
yeah.
This idea of love in the West is about romantic love, which in the East I might think, for the first 3 to 6 months, it's not really love, it's lust. It's the
Right.
idealization of the person, of what they give to you. Is it really the type of love which is about what you can bring to them? Is it something of a union, or is it something that you've half done for yourself and the other person brings? But really, he said he loves everybody, when they come, he loves the time with them and they go, but he's neutral.
Yeah.
They're there or they're not there.
Yeah.
And it's quite a interesting space to start thinking about, because it's not that people don't have meaning, but as we were talking, last time, is if something's got meaning, there's always a polar opposite of them meaningless.
Yeah.
There's something or there's nothing. And
Yeah.
and this interplay we always have about how we try and hold this is important, because was it my ego that was saying something about, if I don't take my laptop and I come back and I've only got 3 emails, which I actually only had 4. And I was like, two
What?
parts of me was, isn't it cool that I can go away and I've got things to the point where everybody's functioning? Isn't that cool? But at the same time, there's that other part of you, the ego that still is in the back of your head saying,
Yeah.
what do you mean you only got, I'm not important enough anymore?
I
And it's
understand that. I do. I understand that. It's like at some point when you're not putting in your energy into do you still count as a human, or do you still have the same
yeah,
pull or importance that you've told yourself that you've had? And it's wild when you kind of shut things down, how little I can relate to that in the sense that I have a tendency to shut down my Facebook and deactivate for like 30 days just to kind of get
yeah,
back to self, because it can become overwhelming and it's an addictive programming for a lot of us. And so there gets this place where it's like, I'm not getting any comments or people responding or people, asking me where I've been. And so you have to take that little bit of that ego hit. But at the same time, it's like, oh, it's like a relief. I'm not responsible for even an eighth of what I've been telling myself I've had to be responsible for. And look at the world still turning without
it's
me.
still turning without me being a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's that sort
nice,
of
it's scary, but it's nice at the same time, depending on what you're talking about, right? With work, I could see where it would be like, oh my gosh, I'm still necessary in this job. And then, but the other hand, it's like, I've been running this so well that it's
yeah,
working, like that mechanism that we've created, that
yeah,
machine that runs on its own, that you've done such a good job that they're not only continuing to run it,
and
but
functioning.
they're respecting your time away enough not to blow you up with emails or consistent calls or, text messages.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then come to the, oh, that might have been more along the lines of what it is.
Well, often that's the way things are set up, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I do remember making a conscious decision years ago after having so many different things to do in work. I think I was doing the
Mhm.
job of 3 or 4 people, and trying to manage all those different things. And with one of the teams that I had, got them to a place that I actually went on holiday for 2 weeks, and it all
Oh,
works really well.
yeah.
But, prior to that, there's something that keeps people invested in this notion of, um, what are the key things that people say? I'm so busy, I'm always busy. All these notions that we tell ourselves, of why we stay involved in those patterns
Mhm.
of being stressed, of being caught in, of operating in that way. And
Mhm.
I think once I realized, and you said something earlier before we started this podcast, is that's the stuff that became obvious, but it had to get really big for me to see that it was that obvious. Now, other
Right.
people around me were saying, I don't know how you do all that. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I couldn't
Because that's become
understand what,
well, that was your consistency. Yeah, that
yeah,
was your normal.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I was approaching everything in that way because that's how I was doing it. And as time went on, and you realize that if you start losing sleep and you start malfunctioning, or you start to look at the world in a different way, as we've spoken in previous podcasts, the signs become more relevant. You start to see them, or if you don't, you either emotionally or physically start to break down. So I had kind of learned that tough lesson, years ago. But it's interesting because we've talked about, if we looked at all of these things as big things that were there, that we were involved in and a part of, and even if we were aware of to some degree, extricating yourself from that and creating some awareness about what is happening in that interaction, in that exchange, that keeps us involved in that, whether
Right.
we're a parent, whether it is work, whether it is creative endeavors, whether it is dramas we get involved with. What is it that keeps us in those games? And the more and more you extricate yourself from that, and especially in the last 18 months with COVID, so many more of us have been at home more,
Mhm.
in our smaller worlds, is you start to realize the subtleties that still draw from your own energy field. And
Yeah.
you said something earlier that was fascinating, which is, we don't always realize that we feel exhausted and tired and burnt out. And we can work hard to heal, get fit, eat well, all of that. And sometimes it can only, and the more sensitive or empathic you are, I think people can feel that on a deeper level. You can have the odd thing that captures your attention, or somebody that sends you a text, like you said, you go on Facebook. And I know I'll start reading something and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then I've read it, and an hour's gone by, and I'm now absorbed in a completely different world of
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
And I have totally left the experience that I'm in. So,
Yeah.
and you do have to get quite disciplined then, don't you? Put the laptop away or the phone away
Yep.
or do something else. Because I kept on reminding myself, even though I'm fairly good at it, when I was on the beach, be here right now,
Yeah.
feel the sand, feel the sun, feel the lights, enjoy the experience. And then when you tune into it, and this is where you get into the sort of mindfulness element of it,
Mhm.
you're not meditating, but you're getting into that relaxed zone. Is then I started to notice the things that capture my attention that really bring me joy, which is little children playing.
Children or the birds that you see, seaside. I can't tell you. I realize that, you know, we'd brought the speaker and we had played it for a little bit, had left to grab lunch and come back. And I never put on music again. Instead, I was so immersed in what the atmosphere that I sat there. I swear an hour went by of me watching these birds chase each other and the way they walked and the way my husband and I began creating these scenarios with these birds and it just became and then you'll see this person walk by with their dog on the lead and and then you're commenting on this dog and how sweet it is. And then you see the children playing and the laughter and you're like, oh, you know what, let's get up and let's walk the beach a little bit. And, and then you're looking at shells and it just becomes this totally immersive experience that if you had maybe pulled out your phone and say that you and I had gotten into a conversation, I would not be immersed in that experience. I'd have one foot in the door and one foot out of the door and not giving myself what I deserve. And what I deserved was to be in that moment and not being directed one way or another by looking at my phone or playing the music, because the ocean just provides so many good sounds. And for me, I needed that. I listen to music all the time, but during that time frame, I really just needed to be immersed in the atmosphere. We flew kites and, just things that we wouldn't normally do because we were so immersed in what we were doing. And I think you said that something about creating the bubble, we were creating this bubble around us. And inside of this bubble was just like, what next? And what could we do to have more fun? And it wasn't like chasing the high. It was more along the lines of, what's that next step? I'm just continuing to step forward. And if this was fun, let's add to that experience. And if that plus that was fun, let's add to that experience. And then it was bedtime, and then we're just flat out exhausted because we've had complete immersion into these experiences all day long inside of this bubble that we created, where even though other energies were present around us, we weren't focused on them enough to change anything that was happening. And we, of course, you take these moments to yourself to say, okay, I'm still a human. I still have responsibilities. I'm still going to check in with a certain, number of things, like for me, it's the kids and please tell me the dogs went outside and got fed today, kind of stuff, because you forget when you're immersed in this experience that other people are existing. The world didn't go on pause. We all wish it would sometimes, but, I just, I will honestly say this would probably be the first trip I've taken that I have felt no desire to be involved with or inside of anything but what I was doing. I didn't feel the pull, the tug to check my phone. I wasn't feeling the pull or the tug to go back and lay down. I wasn't having, any of these normal thought patterns that would cross, or the energy that would flow through and then stop itself, or I would, unconsciously stop it from, just blossoming in that moment. And so for me, this experience was just, exactly what I had always hoped taking short trips would be. And so I'm still very, we got home late last night, so I'm still glowing from it. I'm still in this, slowly slipping back into what reality looks like day to day for me. But I'm still, that energy is still very much within me, still very much, propelling me forward into the excitement that was, planning for today, because I love the podcast that we do. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, and being able to shift in that way was really kind of nice. Like the worst thing I had to do was take a shower today, so.
Yeah. And that bubble that you've referred to, of all of those layers, like you say, you took a step and that was a nice experience. You took another step and that was a nice experience. And you get all those layers of experience that even if, and this is on a sort of brain neural pathway level, even if a thought come in that normally could really just draw your attention to that and then because what happens is then another comes in, another. It doesn't seem to stick. It doesn't seem to come in, because this has been generated so much. And as you were talking, it was almost like I could see almost like a big pink cloud being drawn, and this stuff that normally, these lines that would draw your attention and focus somewhere else and dissipate what's in the cloud,
Right.
it has less opportunity to do that if you give yourself full permission in that time frame. Because I know, and we've talked about intention setting and, you know, the law of attraction and generating this state, and sometimes we have to learn to do that on purpose before it will naturally start to accumulate of its own accord. Because as you say, you know, those experiences can keep dissipating, you know, each of those moments that you've created, because you're drawn back to that thing that created that distraction. And it can generate to the point that, because I know you were in awe of several times, and I was in awe of how all of those aspects of that picture was filling in. It was like I was seeing a picture being created in front of me, the kids, the surfers, the dogs playing, the music, the smell of the food, the whole thing. It was almost like that nothing else would have had that opportunity. But I'd also, in some subtle ways, had sort of planted the seed. If we're thinking about when we talk about new moon, intention setting, and planting a seed, projecting that into the future of towards this time period of creating a space. So it was almost like that was there in the process of being created, and that in that space there is no time to wake up and time to finish. And it, for me, the days felt much longer, where I just got in the car and we just explored and we just went. And the only parameter I had was being able to drive back before it gets too dark, because it's country roads, there are no lights. So I had that window of dawn, literally till sundown. In which to do that. And so the system is on full, it's ramping and ramping and ramping. And it's much easier when you've immersed yourself in those experiences. It sort of reminded me of experiences I've had in the past where I've been in retreats, or when I went and did the yoga training, because the yoga training was again in a setting that it was beautiful. I was with people who were there, you know, for the same thing. We were meditating, we were doing yoga, we were doing chanting, we were out on the beach, all of that. And that immersive experience, that was a longer time. And it actually took me longer back then to generate what now can be generated in a weekend.
Right. And in an environment where you're not learning or, you know, creating where a space has been created for you to get to that place, you know, like these are just normal places, and you now are creating the space for yourself because you've practiced what we've been, you know, we're practicing what we preach, we're walking our talk, and we're realizing that everything that you do can create this bubble, can create these layers of joy, of protection, of in the now, and the just being moments that we are so deserving of. And everything, you know, and it's easy to get caught up in this day-to-day activity. So sometimes a break is exactly what you need. And, you know, there's, you know, been times that I've tried to get this break just by myself and go to a spiritual retreat and then just be highly disappointed. And, you know, inside of that, I've also realized that I create the space. And so wherever I'm going, I can create this joy. I can create an experience. And now that I'm further along in my journey, you know, I'm picking very carefully and very wisely who is involved in my journey and why they're involved in my journey and the root of it, and how that journey builds upon itself by including another, or, picking the people wisely that you want to involve in that, and so even whenever I was on the trip, I was just very careful of who I talked to on the trip, as far as, people on, just if I was checking my phone, I wouldn't respond to certain people because I knew that would take me out of the energy zone I was. And and knowing that, the people I was talking to were easily placed up into the frequency of where, you and I were obviously sitting inside of during these moments we were having. You and I were literally sending pictures back and forth, and that was pretty much the extent of our conversation, was look at this pretty.
Look at how beautiful that.
Yeah,
the
look how pretty
alone were.
It was just wild. And the lesson I will take away from this trip was how little I need to be involved consistently with conversations, at that I'm realizing that it was really just my need to feel needed, and that it's all going to work itself out regardless. I'm not responsible for anything but myself, and I can take on part of the responsibility of another human enjoying themselves as well. And let's just build upon that, instead of me, picking up the phone and making sure so and so is okay, because I knew they were having a rough day or something. Well, they'll make it through. And, and unless it's an emergency situation, I have no need to be involved in that. And even when it's an emergency situation, I couldn't have been involved in it anyway, because I'm not there. So, so it just kind of worked itself out. And inside of this beautiful experience, the lesson coming out of it is this form of nihilism, I think is nihilism, which is just nothing matters. And, you can look at it, the optimistic side or the negative side, and I choose the optimistic side, which is none of this really matters. So I might as well really go and enjoy it. Like every aspect of none of this matters long-term. And I mean, long-term soul journey, that I should just go and really live in my moment and really experience what this world has to offer, and do the things that allow me to get to enjoying what this world has to offer. And it's just been it was a really cool, like, deep breath moment inside of this understanding, as you and I are we're consistently working and walking towards this path of aligning all of the beauty that is within us and outside of us. And when we can sit back for a minute and do the hindsight rule that I like to use, and look back and say, okay, what was the lesson in this? And my lesson was just look at this world, go and enjoy it. Just really go and just immerse yourself in it. You go down to the park and just immerse yourself in it. Go swim in a river or in a lake. Go, go to the, community pool, and you create your bubble. You create the experience. And, there's something about this immersing and realization that everything can just continue to move on. And we already know this. I mean, you and I know this, and we've experienced it. But when it comes back in that cycle and it's in your face, and it's like, hey, guess what? Everything worked itself out, and you just got to be in the moment this whole time. It's like, crown chakra. Thank you. It feels nice to just have that faith and trust that everything is always aligning in your best interests, and you just letting go of the reins and letting it happen.
Yeah. And I think as you were talking, it was reminded me of really why probably people, and I've been to retreats as well, seek a retreat type of experience usually, because it's almost like we need to go to a place that is a container that we know the rules are, put your phones away or don't bring them, and no one's really talking to each other in the mornings, and you're eating healthy, but you're also doing things more mindfully, and everything slows down. And one of the things that made me smile as well, again, when I was listening to Ram Dass, he was saying that when he went to India, he met this young lad that, like, if you looked at what a typical guru looked like, with beard, long hair, walking around the streets. Anyway, there was a real connection between them. And Ram Dass would be, talking about things that had happened, what he'd done, things like that. And the guy was like, stop, you don't need to keep talking about the past. And they'd be talking about other things. You don't need to be talking about the future. And in the end, Ramdas said I had nothing to talk about, you know. It was then easy to be in the silence, because what you realize, we're either talking about the past or we're talking about the future, or we're being drawn into situations because there's a part of us that still thinks they can't survive without us, or, you know, or we still need to be needed. And that's why we have to transplant ourselves into a physical area like a retreat, where all of us are searching for this opportunity to slow the world down, still it down, and be, and just be, which is incredibly challenging if people have never done it, or they do it occasionally. Yet when you apply, you know, if you've been doing it in your life on a, even if, I think they were saying 15-20 minutes of meditation a day, you know, if you're doing that, or even the mindfulness element of it, you will start to see these changes. You will start to feel the subtleties of when you hit, and I think this is probably something that's become a lot more obvious to me in the last few years, when you hit these satisfying places, even if we're not talking about bliss, exhilaration and joy and the lofty sort of experiences, that
contentment, I feel content,
peace, contentment, stillness, of what can be in a lot of people's experiences within reach, that you know, you don't have to meditate for 5 hours a day in order to get that. If your life is chaotic and you've got those things going on, then of course you need to apply these techniques. But often people will resist that, and I've seen that when I've been going to yoga, or when I started teaching, and people will say, what are you doing? I'm going to a yoga trip, you know. Oh, wow, are you? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not as mystical as you think it is, really, because what happens is you're still in a room with other people. There'll always be people that you like. There'll be people that irritate you. You'll either love or hate the teacher in some ways, or, you know. And when I was getting up every day, and I was thinking that this week, when I was getting up every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, where it's actually cold in October, I think it's end of September, it's cold in the mornings in September before the sun comes up, having to find a shower that had hot water long enough so that you warmed your body up before you even walked across the path in the dark to start doing yoga, while feeling moody because you're not feeling like you want to get out of bed. So these are all the real experiences that people have, because we glamorize it,
we glamorize retreats. But I'm going to tell you, I will never go to another one, and that's just it. You know, I had my experience, and that experience taught me that I can create my own experience without being under the guise of other people's rules, other people's stipulations, other people's you know, regimented, you know, timeframes. The framework under them, because I'm here to create my experience, not their experience. And although that does work as you're walking your way forward, you know, the lesson that I learned inside of going to a retreat was I create my own retreat anywhere I go. And that I simply mean I'm not working under another person's, you know, thought pattern of what it is that I should be doing inside of a retreat. I want my own retreat. I want to do what I want to do. And, you know, of course there's, you know, exceptions to that. Like when you're learning something, or you're doing, you know, practicing something for yourself. But
you can either grapple, because I think the common thing that's come out, even if you watch Eat, Pray, Love, you know, the classic film of where she starts to try and meditate and she struggles, and then, you know, she struggles with the relationships of the people that she's having around her. Even if that is the struggle, the other element of that is, you know, I used to look forward to, say, like doing yoga on the beach. And when I was away on this trip, I was chatting with my friend. I said, oh, should we do yoga? And I said, yeah, but not on the beach, because I hated it when I eventually did yoga on the beach. It was cold. It was sand, and sand in your hands, and sand all over your clothes, and in your trainers and everything. So it's that desire to go for things that that you want and trying them, whether it's a retreat or a trip or a weekend away or a visit to somewhere. And then I starting to sort through as I realize, because even still I get up and I think, well, it wasn't just on the retreat it felt like that. It's just that amplified
It amplified
what
it,
I
like
do feel.
put a microscope on it.
Yeah, it amplified the fact that I can feel moody in the mornings and I don't really want to talk to anyone. And I like to gather my thoughts and walk around in my own world and
Yeah.
shift whatever is going on. Well, that was going on anyway. It's just that when you've got small children and you run around from school and school bags and school shoes, the focus is all on them and that's drawn. So you sort of
Yeah.
forget yourself in that.
Yeah.
You just get on with the stuff,
Yep.
don't you? So those things haven't changed. And exactly the same as you is, there were elements of it that I really enjoyed and other elements where I'm sort of flatlining, dead bored,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was
Right.
that balance.
And you get to choose, how you spend your money and where you spend your money. And if,
Yeah.
if retreats are really special to you, I mean, I'm not here to, rain on that parade. I just, from
They've
my
got the
personal
value, yeah.
experience, I felt like I was on more of a retreat this past weekend than
Yes,
anything I've
yeah.
ever done in the past. I felt very at home in my skin. I felt, like I was responsible for me and my thoughts and my environment and what's going on around me. And it felt really nice to kind of take, instead of taking the back seat to what retreat would be, I was taking the front seat to my own life and creating my own sacred space and creating the rituals that I wanted to do, waking up early in the morning. I'm an early riser. And so I'm always up before the sun rises. And so, I just took opportunity. I, went ahead and warned my husband, hey, if I'm not in the room, I promise I didn't run away. I'm just down at the beach being a weirdo. And so, I would walk myself down to the beach and, the tide's starting to go back out and the sun's rising over the ocean. And I'm saying my daily gratitude ritual that I do every morning. And it just kind of hits different because I am inside of this experience I just created. My husband and I worked, and we work really hard to get to this place in our life and to be able to, it's time to enjoy it. And when you get into those moments where you hear the waves coming in and the subtle changes of, the skyline as the dawn is approaching. Yes, there's other people on the beach because who doesn't want to catch a sunrise on the beach, right? And but they're off in their own little world and they're enjoying that peaceful moment for themselves. And, I had brought my phone out just so I could catch a couple of the pictures because you don't get to do it very often. But then the phone went inside the shoe and then it went back over there. And then I just kept walking around and finding little seashells and just completely being grateful for the experience I was having. And that really set me up for the rest of my day. It really allowed me that space to say, I'm here, I'm now, I'm deserving, and I am grateful. And it was just I am glad that the work that has been done over the last few years has really been showing itself. Today, I almost started crying from gratitude, just thinking how much I've manifested my world, how much I came across a post that was about 2 years ago, and it said something like, I am manifesting my ideal experience. And I am sitting inside of the ideal experience I've manifested. I've put in that effort and now I'm reaping this abundance of rewards in all forms. And be able to appreciate it because I've been on plenty of trips. I've gone on plenty of vacations, taken the holidays, traveled to places I've always wanted to see, but it never was as fulfilling for me as it is now because I've made it a point to really be grateful and conscious of what it is I'm immersing myself in. And so to have the takeaway of, whoa, I went to the same beach I've been going to since I was 7 years old, so it wasn't anything brand new, but it was such a fresh set of eyes. That inner child really was coming forward and allowing that, and knowing that, based off the podcast that we've done, and they're deep, and the work that you do is deep, that you forget sometimes to kind of swim up to the surface and say, I'm taking a break. And I'm just going to enjoy what's going on around me in this moment. And to really truly appreciate that is something that is new for me as a witness, for me to witness myself just really being in this moment of joy, of just appreciating everything that life has to offer, and knowing that I have worked really hard to get here. And as you can see, the smile can't leave my face. It's just amazing. And this is part of what you and I really do try to implement in this podcast, is that to get to this space, because the other side is the other side is really deep breathing in that beauty that we're surrounded in, and that's within us at all times, and appreciating it in ways that we've never been able to do so before.
Yeah. And you're highlighting three things I'm hearing through that, which is what happens when you apply any of the techniques or tools, because sometimes we need to apply them externally to generate that as a new behavior over time, so that it becomes more internal, becomes more natural. And that when you have several, like you say, you wake up, you rise at the time where you naturally seem to wake up, and you harness the space and time in which you can go off and walk or have a coffee or whatever, to continue to generate that feeling and stay within yourself. And once the kids get older, obviously it's easier to do that, or it's easier to do it on a break. And so you're generating these different things, which is akin to what you would do in a retreat, and akin to what people do who follow a particular religion, is prayer or gratitude. All of those different elements, when you join them together, can start to work together, like almost like alchemy, to generate this new experience. Part of that process, though, is we don't necessarily know what it's going to be like when we are putting in the work as to what life can feel like and be experienced like. And what I'm seeing, and I'm also in reverence quite often to how I'm experiencing this and what I'm seeing unfold, because if it was a thing that we would just naturally experiencing all the time, and had been for a long time, we'd grown up with this, because in a way that's a privileged world, isn't it, to have a taste of the delight of all these different things, but we haven't. And we've talked about this in several ways of how we've applied and implemented these steps, knowing that we wanted to move away from what wasn't satisfying, that was creating disharmony, not realizing what it all could look like. And you get, and Maslow, I think, in psychology, talked about peak experiences. And one of the most beautiful ways of starting to notice that what you're doing is starting to shift you forward into a space where it's more and more likely where your life is going to start turning around for the better, and you're going to feel more positive, and you're going to start looking at the world through a different lens. Because sometimes it really is like changing the lens, is you get these peak experiences, and it's almost like it can be half an hour a day, a flash, a high exhilaration, whatever it is. And then it might be that you go back to whatever your day-to-day life is. It could feel mundane, flat, depressive, whatever. And then you'll get another peak experience. And it's not like, and the danger sometimes for some people is they then have a taste of that. And we've looked at that in terms of meditation. So one of the, as I've said before, meditation's different for everyone, which is why I don't sit and say, this is how you should do it. I know how I've done it over the years and what's worked for me and what hasn't, but it's often a different experience. But the thing with that is that slowing down of everything and experiencing yourself fully in terms of how your breath feels, how your body feels as you sit on the floor. Are you feeling light? Are you feeling heavy? What's the air feel like on your face? The moment you bring all your energy and attention back to yourself, is it just allows those things that grip us most of the time to lose their grip and to gently move away, to make some space. And it's interesting, we're both talking about this space that's been created, or the physical space that we entered that was beautiful beach, beautiful sunshine, even if it's raining, it's still beautiful. But really the work, in terms of all of the stuff that we bring with us, the persona, the experiences, the trauma, all of that fills the space. So we have to release and let that go. And part of that process, and we started to touch on the idea of the shadow, part of that process is what is accumulated. It's almost like, you pick up one bag and another bag and another bag through all these experiences. What's accumulated, whether it is like the character in Charlie Brown always comes to my mind. It was one of the characters, and he used to always have this haze of dust around him. I can't remember which one it was. I
can't remember his name, but he carried a blanket. Yeah.
He carried a blanket, and there was always this, and it always reminds me of what our energy field accumulates when we just magnify and attract this stuff that weighs us down, that makes it heavy, that makes it harder to walk. And we don't know what the destination is going to look like if that has been our familiar space. But what we know, what I certainly know, because I've whether it is young Freud, Maslow, or Jordan Peterson, or Abraham Hicks, or whoever the people that we listen to within the field of psychology in terms of how it's grown over the years, is what we know is that implementing something on a consistent basis, you are going to start to see results. But if your brain can't comprehend it, because we're in this either place of lack or place of victimhood or place of survival, and it serves a purpose with us being there, because everything can have a payoff. We can have friends that like us being victims, because superior and inferior is another pattern that runs through lots of relationships. We'll always compare ourselves to somebody else, so we feel better, they feel worse, all right, even if we're not conscious of it. So this stuff we accumulate drags us down, slows us down, and interferes with what we could be receptive to. It's a bit like how sometimes the haze just blocks the sun, or an eclipse goes over, and and for a moment everything is dark. Well, that's us as humans. And it is, I still have to, like the way that you were talking, sit back and review those moments. Because equally now, coming back, I'm back at work now, and I thought, I don't want it to be only 2 days that I'm still enjoying the benefits of all of these beautiful experiences and interactions, like what you're saying with people. That, because that's the other thing, I kind of was like, I wasn't feeling excited, like, oh, really looking forward to going. But at the same time, I just knew there was a window of opportunity. Because the other thing is, I could not predict for one moment how the trip was going to be, the people I was going to come into contact with, the food I was going to enjoy, or the bar that I was going to walk into, or the music that was, all of those elements. I knew that there was going to be that there, but nothing's ever guaranteed.
No,
because
it's not. Yeah.
No, and it just.
But it's great to kind of, I guess now it's, I always call it adequate packing, I used to have a tendency to overpack because of the what ifs, residing in what if land. And then I just kind of gave up all of that. Then I found myself underpacking and being really like, oh my God, I have to go buy something because I forgot all of this stuff underpacking. But, you know, what I've learned to do is I don't, because I think you and I enter and have resided in the center of the wheel. So these roller coaster emotions aren't like they used to be, right? We don't ride the
Yes.
roller coaster. We're in the middle. And we know that the trip is going to be something enjoyable because we have the opportunity to do it, right? And then we know we
Yes.
create the
Yeah.
space. So I began doing the little things like I don't even pre-pack. Maybe the night before I pull out the suitcase and I pull out a couple outfits, and then that day of I'll start putting the things in there and prepping myself to go, unless I'm leaving early in the morning, of course. And then I kind of get excited in that way, like, oh, you know, I love this outfit. I feel so confident in it. Instead of just in case we go here, I'm like, I wore dresses all week and I'm not really a huge dress
Yeah.
wearer. But normally it's very particular about when I wear a dress. So I was like, I like wearing dresses right now. So I'm just going to pack some dresses this week. And it doesn't matter if we go anywhere, I'll still wear it. And, you know, and then it got excited because I realized that I was going to be on a little road trip, and the road trip was going to be part of the journey, and the journey to the destination is something you know, for me has been a new thing. I've always been so, focused on the
On the
destination
destination.
that I
Yeah.
forget to enjoy the journey. So then it
Yeah.
became about the journey and being in this, having this journey with my, my best friend, who is my husband. And, it was the furthest we had taken the vehicles up to this point. And because it's an electric vehicle, you kind of have to plan around the stops and that stuff. So it made it a little bit longer than it would have, but that was actually kind of more fun for us because every stop created this thing that we would do. We were like, okay, we're stopped here, so let's go walk over here, or let's go do this, or let's, have this moment, stretch our legs, whatever. And then by the time you hit the destination, you're already having a great time. And then the destination just becomes the next step of the journey. And now you're here inside of that part of the journey. And, I think whenever you live too far in the future for when you're doing vacation is when it would, for me personally, that's when I would start finding that anxiety, getting the worrisome, the picking the fight with the spouse, not quite being happy enough, like the Chinese ghosts that are never satisfied, and because I'm not in my now, I didn't clear the space. I'm carrying myself on vacation. I'm carrying all of the trauma, all of the, the resentment, all of the, you just enter whatever, you feel in that moment with me. And being able to just take these in blocks of things, like packing's now a little bit more fun, and now the journey is a little bit more fun, which then leads you to the fun part, which is the vacation itself. You're on holiday, it's time to have a blast. And because you've started to do these things in this beautiful step-by-step motion without being so concerned about the outcome of it, it becomes a lot more of an enjoyable experience. And you're not focused on what you're not doing or what you have to do or what wasn't done before you left, or, because you're not in your past, you're not in your future, you're sitting in your now. And when we talk doing the work, we are really talking from experience. And when we talk that we want to, create this new life for ourselves, we're really putting in that effort to do this. And so to experience the effort in action is just a really amazing experience to have. And it's so precious. And I highly recommend everybody just walking through that shadow, that underworld, that experience. It might be a little harder to face because this other side of the world is just mesmerizing. It is a different experience entirely, and we are all so deserving of that.
Yeah. And I think the key element that made me sort of move from my comfortable space of the sofa and the space I'm in a lot of the time
It's a great space.
was remembering previous trips where going into a brand new space, so many things opened up that ignited the sense of what the child energy, really, the sense of wonder, the sense of adventure, the ability to explore, whether you share that or whether you generate that as something you want to do for yourself. The trick is, like you say, because, you know, if we looked at the suitcase as a metaphor for what we take with us, you know, in terms of what we pack, what we carry in when we go on that trip, rather than planning for every eventuality. Because actually, what happened while I was in the last 2 days, we've had a petrol crisis, a fuel crisis in the UK. And because we weren't watching TV, and I don't watch the news anyway, but on my phone I've got now, think sometimes it'll flash up and it says petrol crisis. And I was like, I'm 250 miles away from home and I've got a quarter of a tank. I'm actually not going to get home if I don't. So I could feel, and we talked, and you talk about this a lot, about being in the center of the wheel, that the chaos can be all around, but how do we stay centered and not get drawn into our own dramas or the dramas that are accumulating around us? Because there's still astrologically the potential over the next month for the chaos to ensue in lots of different ways. At the moment, it's a fuel crisis, and I think we've got an energy crisis lurking that has been so-called round the corner. So I'm there 250 miles away from home. I'm in the UK, so that at least it is a good thing, because I have been stuck abroad. I think it was 2013 or 11, I can't remember which one, when the Icelandic ash cloud erupted. And filled the sky in the whole world. And I was actually on holiday with a friend in Tunisia, and it was one of the holidays that I actually hated from the moment that I landed. I didn't like the area, I didn't like the place. It was 10 security guards on beaches and just the whole thing. And so if there's one place that I never really wanted to get stuck in the world, at the time was there. So I think we were about 3 days away from flying back, when on the news, because when you go to Europe, when you're from the UK, all you get is news on the TV, Euro News, Sky News, all of that. You don't seem to get any other programs. And so 24/7 the news is showing this volcano erupting, and my friend and I are in the room watching it unfold. Our brain's not comprehending what is happening, because that's the thing, when things come that you don't expect. So my first reaction is, because we all have a reaction, don't we, is I'm getting the hell out of here. So I'm trying to work this computer that had a keyboard that looked like hieroglyphics. And honestly, I've never spent so long trying to construct an email in my life, because I couldn't find the keys and I kept on running out of money for the internet, because it all worked different. Trying to work out how to get to Italy from there by boat. My friend who's I think my friend went into shock because I'm talking to her and there's nothing's going on. And I'm like, do I leave my friend here and Scarpa? Do I stay here? Do we ride it out? So this was now panic and fear being activated in a country that I didn't really want to spend time in, that I didn't feel that safe in. Now, safety and trust is a whole different ball game. So the idea of being in another country, and then we ended up being transferred to another hotel, to another part of the island. And it was really bizarre, because when you do start to meditate and practice mindfulness, it's quite interesting how you start to see a movie unfold in front of your eyes, And so I remember sitting in the gardens of it, and the hotel they moved us to, we were really lucky. Everything was covered with this company. So we were still in, accommodation, but it was in a better part of the island. It was safer. But now that it was tense, because we're not on holiday anymore. And I saw this at the beginning of COVID, where people are on beautiful desert islands, partying away, free love, free, spirited, all of that. This hits and everything changes, because
Right.
nirvana is only ever superficial to a large degree in a lot of these things. And so we're watching all this unfold, and the whole conversation all the time, as it was here last year to do with COVID, was just that one thing about the Icelandic ash cloud. So I'm in Cornwall this week, and the petrol crisis comes up. So I could feel the rumblings, and we were talking earlier that initially, and Ram Dass was talking about this. He said something that I absolutely loved hearing, because he was a psychologist throughout. He was a professor and an esteemed one for a long time, until they, because he experimented a bit with mushrooms, and that wasn't taken too well in the establishment at the time. And he talked about how no matter how much he meditated and his gurus, and how much introspective work he did, or dimensions he traveled to, he still had his neurosis. And this is an eminent professor of PhD psychology that
Right.
talks about that. And so that's the thing, is no matter how much work you put into it and how much you apply these things, we still have these things that make us who we are, whether it's the drama or what we get caught into. But he says over time, what happens, and this is how I was experiencing it this week, it's not big like this. The shock or the fear or the whatever doesn't expand to a really large place, but you still experience it. I still felt that tension. I still felt the panic of wanting to drive to the petrol station and fill up the car and fill up my shoes and fill up everything.
Some plastic bags or something. Yeah.
So that I was like, yeah. But then my rational mind then, because if you go into panic, you lose your rational mind.
Yeah.
My rational mind came in and said, Mel, you're in the UK. You're okay. If
Right.
the car doesn't move because there's no petrol, there are still trains, there are still buses, or you sort something else out. And then I'm thinking, but I didn't bring my work laptop.
But they need me.
They need me.
They need me.
They can only do without me for 5 days or 10 days. And so the rational brain was talking to the part of me, the neurosis, the little part that was going, what about that? So I was like, no. So again, strategy, breathe into the moment. Okay, what shall I do? Yeah, let's go and find if I can top up the car, but not with that erratic scrambling.
It wasn't
energy.
a survival technique. It was more, it was more
measured.
I'm an adult human, and I know I need a plan. So I'm just going to go ahead and, without myself be going straight into survival mode, I'm just going to create this plan for myself that I'm not attached to. I know I'm going to need gasoline. I know this. So I was going to need it anyways. So I might as well stop and do that. And without letting that fear-mongering spirit within
that makes
us
you feel like you go into fight or flight.
Yes. And it does. It really does.
It really does.
I have my own as well. And it's one of those moments where you have to pat yourself on the back for not spinning out, because you could easily have spun out. And because that was
kicking everyone out the way. Get out of the way.
I
need this special.
out of my way.
And then it's trust, because it's then tapping into your internal radar. Of putting the feelers out and go, okay, I do need this because I won't get home. So let's give it a go. And because one had already closed, because the media had obviously instigated all this. So one had already closed. So it's like, okay. But in that part of the UK, it's very rural. Shops are not like here, where I can go to 5 petrol stations around me. And well, actually it's not working at the moment because most of those have been closed, but I'm in a rural place where everything's like 7 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles. So luckily I had my now new phone, because the other phone had died. So and I'm like, where are the stations? So it was keeping in the rational mind, and it was breathing into what started to feel like some panic of, Where am I? How will I get home? All of that, which was very similar to the feelings I had when I was in, when I was on holiday and
Right.
the Icelandic cloud erupts, because these patterns of being and these experiences are the same no matter where we are,
Yeah, it's the
and
same
manifest in
framework.
the same way.
Yeah. Same
Yeah.
framework. It just details are a little different. And
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's always interesting when we hit that part of that cycle, or that, out of our control events, and being in the center of the will, it's far less traumatic on the body, on the mind, and on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
spirit. If you say, I can see where there's a potential for a problem, but I'm not going to act as if the problem already exists. Instead,
Yeah.
I'm just going to take steps in the right direction to prevent any sort of problem to be created, or to create a problem that isn't going to be there. And
Yeah.
yeah, and this happens to me often. I read it too far into things, I do too far into things, but when you're able to step back and allow that rational brain. And I love that you're speaking of the rational, and then your right side, left side brain, because we are in Mercury retrograde right now.
Mm.
And I feel like that might have helped you out a little bit, because what Mercury retrograde does is, say you use your right side of the brain, well, now it's going to ask you to use the left side of the brain, or vice versa, right? So now you're having to get creative with a logical problem, instead of like
Yes.
running in circles around the potentiality of the problem. Now
Yeah.
you're having to now focus on a creative ways to accommodating the problem. And
Yeah.
being in Mercury retrograde is actually a perfect time to do that in, because it allows, if you're normally a left brain person, to think, and now you're thinking more rationally instead of more emotionally based. And so it's cool that happened during the shadow side of Mercury hitting. Yeah.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? Is the shadow is where we've collected all of those messages and ideas, and not just who we think we are, or
No.
the aspects of ourselves that we don't want to show to people, but all of those patterns of interactions, of how we interact with people, the environment, um, our spirit, the earth, whatever that is, that interaction all the time. And so to sort of have it phrased in that way, and I've heard this a few times, because I think this is one of the things that can trip a lot of people up, whether they're in the spiritual realm, the psychology realm, whether they're professionals or lay people, whatever level of understanding and experience they've got, is that somehow, if we apply all of these things, that somehow we get to a homeostasis and everything just ticks along tickety boo, and that nothing ever sort of comes along that challenges us
Yeah.
again. So that's sometimes part of the fear of releasing the drama. And because drama can ignite quite strong, passionate, enlivening emotions, just as anger does. Whereas depression, anxiety is just living on the tipping point all the time, is
Yeah.
not pleasant. You can't live like that too long. Depression can just feel like flatlining, where there
Yeah.
is nothing, no energy or whatever.
Yeah.
So the drama can be quite attractive to a
Yeah.
lot of people to be hooked into, because
Yeah.
it's enlivening. And so sometimes, and it's a bit like going back to placing my laptop somewhere that I'm not going to take it with me, because when you allow yourself to release what you've been partaking in, the ego mind can be like, well, who are you going to be, and then what? Well,
Right.
then it's boring. What are you going to do? And I still, after years of practicing meditation, mindfulness, doing yoga, I still get that, because that's
Yeah.
still a pattern that comes up for me.
Because we're created to have that pattern. That is more than just conditioning. That is literally a pattern that your brain has inside of it. And of course, there's
Yeah.
outside external forces that help create part of that the way you do it. But yeah, this is just part of it. But and like you're saying, we're just getting ourselves tools on the belt, resources so that we can kind of not fall into the drama, not fall into the
and get
chaos,
locked into it.
and not get, yes. And so now
Yeah.
what you're doing is kind of, if you want to imagine it as like you're fighting back, this is, you're
Well,
bringing.
you're noticing it and you're saying, hey, hang on a minute, because like in the petrol situation, well, the
Yeah.
reality was I need petrol in the car to get home. Once I'm home, I don't use the car anywhere near as
Right.
much, like a lot of people. But at that point, so the reality was, yes, that's a reasonable expectation,
Very
is to get
reasonable.
that need met.
Yeah.
So your rational brain can look at that. The fear and the anxiety that can be generated in those moments that create that frenetic way of responding is the bit which is linked to sort of deeper pattern and deeper experiences that people have had where they felt unsafe in the world for whatever reason. And then there's that other part of you, which is who you have been and who you've thought yourself to be. And so already, if people are listening to us now, already they'd be like, oh, well, there's this and this. And as you said earlier, sometimes transplanting yourself and going to a new space is because there's just too much going on. It gets overwhelming. And our brain, I can manage these, but could I manage it all in one go? If the petrol thing was happening at the same time, something else, you then have to take yourself off to a different space with no people at all, to regroup, to ground yourself, to get back into your body, because if you trip out too much in fight or flight, then you can have all these reactions and slip into a way of being that will, the trigger of the pattern will throw you into a way of being that is not productive anymore, or that can get you into trouble, or, depending on what your response has been in the past. Because some people can even go on, I know when I've had intense extreme days, that's when I need sometimes an intense extreme experience to counteract it, to bring it down, and it's that interplay that can be overwhelming.
Yes.
So it's almost like, I think, you said it, we have to prepare. The work is about preparing us, isn't it? It's preparing us for the journey we haven't taken yet, so that when things come up, we're less likely to be knocked over by the wind and the rain. And
you're no longer a cow being tipped. Now
Yes.
you're standing still like a tree, and trees are hard to sway. You're building the root system. The deep roots, so that as your branches grow, no wind will bend or break you. Things are going to sway you. This is part of life. Life
resilience.
is meant to be stacked with experiences, and not all experiences are going to be perceived as good. But the more you build that root system, build your tools, work through your issues so that you can come on the other side. It doesn't mean that the world doesn't change just because you did. But the perception of the world changes because you did. And the way that you handle the world changes because you did. And, I have experiences consistently that would used to wrap me in the drama of it all and the chaos of it all, and just be very involved in every aspect of it and the need to be involved in it. And now I kind of just sit back and say, this is what it is. So, obviously through heart, but in a logical way, how do I work through this? And, and find the compassion in it, and find the grace in it, and realize that there's still beauty inside of whatever that negative experience is. There's still something very beautiful to take away from it. But because I've garnered the tools, because I've really worked on those things, those hot buttons, those moments that felt very survival instinct kicking in, I've began to, when life comes, it does its little, roller coaster movement on me, it's not as severe anymore. Now it's more like, this is here. So now how do I fix this? Or how do I acknowledge this? Or how do I, move through this? And it just really seems to help tremendously.
Yeah, because as you were talking, I was getting the image of an athlete, because athletes train for events, but whether you're a mountain climber, an athlete, swimmer, it's you're preparing the mind and body. It's about your focus, isn't it? And it's about mental resilience and physical resilience. And I think, again, this was a mistake I made years ago. You know, it's like, well, I work on all this stuff and I've cleared this stuff. And it's like, then something would come along. And there was a phrase that I read a few weeks ago where I think someone was saying, you know, they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So they can't trust that, because it's like the anxiety and all of that stuff that we hold on to is sometimes because it's this thwarted perception of, well, if we do that, it keeps us safe because the shoe's always going to drop. So in a way, you're then you've got the potential to remanifest the reality that you don't want, because you're holding the belief that, you know, the moment things start to improve and get better, shoe's going to drop. But it's a fallacy, because life is the cycle of ups and downs, birth, death, marriages, all of that, the natural cycles, you know, that at some point we're going to experience something that is going to be stressful, sad, good, or whatever. But I think both of us experienced much more, and for longer periods of time, those what can be intermittent peak experiences that often people don't even realize is a peak experience, because they're so caught in the mental limitations that even when the peak experience is there, they can't harness it enough.
Well, because they're living in
what
I call it what if land, the other shoe dropping land, you know, what if, and we can reside there. Yeah. And you can reside there all you want. It's just not going to be as you're not going to find that moment of pure joy, pure bliss, pure peace that, you know, we all are so very deserving of having. And then once you realize that you don't reside in what if land anymore, that is when the longer sense of time where you have that pivotal or that peak moment, and you can really just let it come in. It's like savoring a really good meal, you know, and and then you remember that meal for years to come, because you really just took the time to stop and relax and just take it in and enjoy it on all of the senses that you can. And, you know, when you stop living in the what if, you begin to live in the now, and in the now, you really can enjoy the peaks, and the valleys aren't so low, because those are just momentary lapses in the cycle of life. And you know, on the other side of that, there will be this. And if you're going to reside in what if land, you need to reside in that in the beginning when you're at your low. And what if things are great? You know, that's a what if land you're cool to live in. I loved living in, you know, what if I could do all of these things I've dreamed about doing? And, you know, and allowing my mind to wander in that land. We have a tendency to live in the what if, as in the, what if the other shoe drops, and not what if everything works out for me.
Yeah, what if this is actually much more wonderful than I can even comprehend?
Yeah. Then you can live in what if land all you want. I won't have a word to say about it. You go live in what if land. But we have a tendency to live in the negative side of that what if land. Again, I think I wrote an actual poem about what ifs.
Have you?
Yeah, I have a tendency to write poetry about experiences that we have in our journey in the world. So yeah, I actually have a whole what if poem.
Oh, that would be great to hear, actually, at some point. Yeah,
I'll get it out for you. But yeah, so when we are, you know, we started this talking about this beautiful holiday that you and I both got to take and the experiences, but there was purpose behind that. You know, the purpose for us to even talk about this is there's proof in the pudding. There is proof that the hard work that you put in does pay off. And it's proof that if you just allow these moments to come and these moments to go, you're going to find out that that is the consistency in this world. It comes in, it's like the tide. It comes in and it goes out. It comes in and it goes out. And where you place yourself inside of that is the joyous or the level of experience that you're going to have. And we definitely have put in, and by we, I mean collectively speaking, we've put in enough of the sad work, the depressed work, the anxious work, the hard work, the stuff that really doesn't amount to anything work. So let's start stuffing the cornucopia. You never know, what comes out. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see that, all this hard work we do ends up being the blissful 8 to 10 days and on a beautiful beach, or the blissful experience that I had, and just allowing that to form even when you don't know.
Yeah. And I think just before we end, whoever's listening, we can invite them wherever they are, as long as they're not driving,
Don't drive.
to join us on a little journey to consider what you beautifully just shared about how we can use what ifs. So it's almost the opposite of the sort of anxiety about what could happen and things go wrong and calamities and all of that. So because it's part of one, generating maybe some of the states that you don't always have access to, or noticing what you can and can't access easily, because some people will have some taste of it and some won't have taste of that yet. I'm going to use the word yet because it is possible for everyone, whether they can visualize it or feel into it.
Right.
So for a moment, I could ask you to consider your what ifs. Okay. So you've had this trip and you've had a taste of the honey and, the good experiences. So what if there was something even more? So
Mm-hmm.
anyone who's listening now, what if there was something more than any of the other what if experiences they've had in the past that maybe they didn't realize until they did that day trip out or that weekend or took that job or whatever, that actually there were loads of beautiful moments that occurred as a point of that? And how do we pull all those in and notice the things that maybe don't feel as good, because we go, okay, next time I'm not going on a fishing trip, or next time I'm not doing that, and go back into that experience. Or if you haven't generated that, consider, am I the sort of person that is thinking, well, it won't, as we're talking, are you thinking it won't happen to me, good things never happen? Are these core beliefs that you need to look at?
Yeah.
Let those go for one moment, and just for a brief period of time, entertain the possibility that there's some other what ifs out there. So what if I could travel to a destination I've always dreamed of going? What if I could take the mode of transport that I see myself as wanting to go on? So whether that's rickshaw, plane, bike, in your own trainers, whatever that is.
By
So
boat, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
exactly. So
Whatever makes that heart pitter patter a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. So you've generated that experience so far. So let's open your mind up even more, because you can't at the moment necessarily comprehend how much more this could look like or experience like. So what if your next set of experiences or journey is something that comes to you that you haven't even entertained as a thought yet?
Right.
And notice what comes to you. If there aren't things coming to you and you find that some negative thinking or whatever is there, just say, thank you, brain, thank you, ego, you've always looked after me and you kept me safe. I
Thank you for
appreciate
keeping me
that.
safe and keeping me in
Keep me
reality.
safe. And you
Yeah.
keep me in this world. But let's park you for a minute. Let's put those negative thoughts up there, over there, attach them to a cloud, allow them to drift away. We can attend to them later. Now start to experience what are you seeing in that, or what you're feeling in that image or that experience that's coming to you. And just allow yourself to sit and experience and open your mind to that. We have a choice now at this point in history for everybody, in terms of anyone that's tuning into this and their families and friends and everyone, to either go down the timeline of what if all the eventualities lead to war, destruction, famine, and all of that, or to entertain a timeline that actually is also equally possible of us taking these trips. And me and you wouldn't be so passionate about this had we not done these steps
Yeah.
and put in this work to know what was possible.
Well, yeah.
Because, yeah, because
Give yourself the freedom to daydream.
to daydream. Yeah.
Give yourself the freedom to live inside of a world that is fantastical. Give
Your
yourself that
ideal.
freedom. Yes, because I mean, we are so busy keeping the negatives intact that we forget that there is a wonderful land of things that we can daydream, that can envision the beginnings of manifestation that
Yeah.
reside inside of your thoughts, inside of your imaginings, inside of the daydreaming. And it's funny because I went ahead and grabbed my notebook and I opened it directly to the page. So since we're talking about what ifs and allowing ourselves to imagine and allowing ourselves this freedom of the space to create your ideal experience, I figured before we leave, I could go ahead and read this poem. And,
That'd be
I'm a
beautiful.
little shy about my poems out loud, but I'm going to do this. I feel confident. And it's what if? What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? What if the other shoe drops? What if it doesn't? We could play this game all day long, as it has the same rhythm, the same song. Nothing like a little what if to fill your day, keeping you from your greatness, filling it with dismay. Some of us treat what if as a real place, allowing it to consume our deserving grace. If what if resided on a positive note, we would be more eager to lie there and float. Yet we want to stay in the negative, creating anxiety. This seems to be a common denominator inside of society. This world is meant to be experienced and lived, filled with compassion and quick to forgive. When you are consistently waiting for the other shoe to drop, allowing your mind to wander at a rate you can't stop, it is no wonder that the worst can occur when your mind and the universe always concur. So try your best to stay in the here and now. While you're not fighting your future, the heart will allow.
I love that.
Thank you. So we are all capable of having such a creative imaginations that allow us the freedom to realize our worth. And inside of that worth, it gives us this moment of pause that says, I am worthy of these things. What is it that I can do to create that? And then you do what you need to do to find the creation to get to whatever it is that brings your joy.
Yeah. So make a decision tonight or whatever part of the world you're in tomorrow in the morning, of one thing that can start to form the building block to explore the upside of all the what ifs, as your poem demonstrates, because we're all very well versed in all the other stuff. We're not as well versed in entertaining these ideas, especially in the world, in terms of what we see unfolding. But there are beautiful stories, beautiful memories, beautiful thought forms all around us. If we struggle to tap into that in ourselves, ask other people, ask your friends, what if you had 2 weeks to go anywhere, do anything, or where is it that you start to generate? Have you had peak experiences? Have you had moments where you just felt at one, sounds twee, doesn't it, at one with everything, but where it is timeless, where you don't notice time anymore, where you just experience the wonder as though you're that 3-year-old child on the beach, generating, and allow yourself to generate and sit and generate and magnify and keep that energy moving and being so beautifully, as Ramdas says, being here now,
Yeah.
you know, in this moment.
Being here and now.
Being here now. Yeah. So thank you for your time again. And it's lovely seeing you. And
you too.
Great
and thank
knowing
you,
that you had
everyone.
a fantastic trip, just as I did. But
I can
I
see the
look
glow
forward
on you too.
yeah. We'll paint some pictures. Yeah. So I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes. Talk soon.